This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this first edition of CBN NewsWatch for Thursday, August 15th. I'm George Thomas. Today, the gunman in Philadelphia who shot 6 policemen surrenders after an hours-long standoff with police. What's next for stocks and the economy after Wednesday's massive sell-off on Wall Street over fears of a recession? Jews from around the world immigrating to Israel in what some call a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and how one organization is helping conservative young women in a hostile environment, college campuses. Those stories and much more today on NewsWatch. We begin, though, with the gunman in Philadelphia police custody after a shootout and standoff that injured at least 9 officers, 6 with gunshot wounds. 34-year-old Maurice Hill, who has a long record of drug offenses dating back to 2003, surrendered to officers shortly after midnight, ending the 8-hour ordeal in a North Philly neighborhood that began with police serving a drug warrant.
We have an officer shot, and they're still being shot at.
Please send additional cars immediately. Send additional cars.
As you can see, the tense moments Wednesday afternoon as the situation became critical for officers dealing with Hill, who had barricaded himself in a home. A police spokesman says he fired multiple rounds on them and officers returned fire. They were trying to dodge bullets. Patrol cars, officers, and special SWAT and tactical teams rushed to the scene, blocking off the streets and working to rescue fellow officers trapped in the house. They also rescued 2 women and 2 teenage girls who were in the area. One woman who witnessed the whole thing says she heard at least 100 gunshots. Now to the economy. Investors are bracing for more selling in the days ahead on Wall Street. The Dow dropped more than 800 points Wednesday over growing fears of a recession from what's called an inverted yield curve. That's when short-term interest rates rise above long-term on government securities. By the way, the last time this happened was back in 2007, right before the Great Recession. Stephen Moore, an economist with the Heritage Foundation, doesn't think a recession is on the way, but says there is no doubt the economy has slowed down. In an interview with CBN's Faith Nation, he pointed to 2 factors. Take a listen.
Number one, the ongoing trade war with China and the uncertainty that has created. And the second factor has been the Fed, which, in my opinion and Donald Trump's opinion, has been way too tight. And when you have the interest rates this low and the inverted yield curve, that's a sign of Fed being way too tight with money, and that needs to be reversed.
With us now is our CBN News financial editor, Drew Parkhill. So, Drew, Wall Street, as you know, is fixated on the inverted yield curve. Does it really mean we're talking about a recession here?
Very, very possible. In fact, I would say likely. Now, the yield curve has to be the inversion has to be sustained. It's just short-term interest rates go above long, which is not normal. When you go to a bank, you're going to get more money on a long-term loan and so on and so forth. Yeah. But when you see this, it means that there's real concern that the economy is getting weaker. Now, if it just lasts a few days, it's probably not a big deal and everything will stabilize. But if we see this sustained, especially at the wider edges of it, then yes, it probably means a recession's coming.
All of this,
it's a very good indicator.
Yeah, all of this, Drew, is happening in the midst of this trade war with China. Any indication that this is part of the blame?
It's probably a contributing factor. To some extent, causes uncertainty, but we have seen slowdown in other parts of the economy and in the rest of the world, and that's a big issue.
Let's talk about the pressure now about having to cut interest rates. Is that where we're going?
Yes, President Trump is right.
Yeah.
Historically, the Fed has been behind the curve on this. They tend to raise rates when we're going into a recession, which is a big mistake. They should be cutting, and he's right. And it's not just him. A lot of other people feel that way. If they cut rates, then the yield curve would go back to normal. Long-term rates would be higher, and it would help. But eventually, they can't cut rates to 0.
Yeah, so I mentioned 800 points drop yesterday. What about people's 401ks and retirement plans?
It all depends, George, on what your time frame is. Over the longer term, I expect stocks will go much, much higher. Not necessarily in the short term in the next few years, but over the years ahead, going, 5, 10, 15 years out, you will see stocks much, much higher than where they are now.
Yeah, and for somebody who is so young like me, I'm thinking long term, right?
Yeah, you're just barely out of the cradle.
That's right, exactly. Drew, you are always the man. Thank you for coming on the show. Okay, we move now overseas to Israel, where nearly 250 new immigrants arrived this week. As my colleague Chris Mitchell reports from David Ben-Gurion Airport, many see their arrival as a prophetic fulfillment when God said he would gather his people to the promised land from the four corners of the world.
After a 10-hour flight, with some waiting and planning the trip for years, these Olim, or new immigrants, set foot on the promised land. The arrivals come from 22 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and include 103 children, 3 sets of twins, and a 28-day-old baby.
This is a great situation for the state of Israel, that 240 Jews from North America arrive in Israel here, and we are very proud to have them as students, as soldiers, as partners in the state of Israel.
Nefesh B'Nefesh organized this arrival, a milestone for the organization.
60,000 Olim, our 60th charter flight. It's as glorious as the first flight. Seeing people fulfill their dreams, coming home, it's remarkable.
The first time, the first person is just as important and just as exciting as the 60,000th person right now.
This brother and sister reunited after 2 years.
I don't know, I'm overjoyed. Like, it's so weird. I've been here like alone, and now I have my brother. It's amazing.
And families made the journey.
It's just one of the most amazing feelings in the world to be able to come to our homeland, to be part of the state of Israel, the Jewish homeland that we've always dreamed of being a part of.
Is this a dream come true?
Absolutely, absolutely.
We are living the dream.
David is the nephew of Yechiel Eckstein, who brought thousands of Jews to the land of Israel and passed away recently. Beryl is Yechiel's brother.
I miss my brother being here, but he's here. And I know that he would have been the first one to greet David. He loved him so much.
For the Ecksteins and many other families making Aliyah, it's about the generations.
We're so proud of them to make this decision at this stage in their life, to come back home where my father was born, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and now this generation's coming home.
It's also about the Bible coming to life.
It's about the ingathering of the exiles, bringing the Jewish people home. But it's not even for me, it's not even because of the fulfillment of prophecies that I'm so happy. It's because my family is coming home. And we're all together finally. And when we're all together in our land, that brings the most light to the whole world.
For these new arrivals, their Israel adventure is just beginning. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, David Ben-Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv.
Incredible images there. Coming up, China has been threatening a political military crackdown on the protesters in Hong Kong. But how would other countries react if Beijing actually sent in the troops? We'll look at that question when we come back.
Give me that. Bye. Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet, and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
And welcome back to the CBN News Channel. Will Communist China send troops into Hong Kong to prevent the pro-democracy movement from spreading? Well, a lot may be at stake for both the protesters and Beijing. On tonight's episode of The Global Lane on the CBN News Channel right here, China expert Stephen Mosher says China's government must think of the consequences of a bloody response. That's because a crackdown in Hong Kong would be very different than the one that occurred 30 years ago at Tiananmen Square. Here's a look at that interview.
Beijing is operating a government which insists on total control of its own people. And Hong Kong, unfortunately, is about to come under that total control, I'm afraid. And this reminds me terribly much of the months, weeks leading up to the Tiananmen massacre. Remember that in April of 1989, hundreds of thousands of protesters gathered in the streets of Beijing, capital city. And at the end of the day, on June 4th, 1989, the government used troops and tanks to shoot down and run down unarmed protesters. These protesters in Hong Kong are not terrorists, obviously. They're mostly young people, students, young entrepreneurs who don't want to lose the freedoms that they have enjoyed for the last 180 years to the Chinese Communist regime. And yet, under Xi Jinping, there appears to be no room for compromise. Xi Jinping has been tightening control all over China, and now he wants to bring Hong Kong within his grasp as well.
Do you expect that this means Chinese troops may be occupying Hong Kong soon? What's coming?
Well, I think that we may be seeing a bloodbath on the scale of the Tiananmen massacre in 1989. The difference is that instead of in 1989, 100 or so foreign journalists being held captive in one hotel in downtown Beijing. This massacre, this bloodshed will play out in the eyes of the entire world. Hong Kong is wired. There are thousands of correspondents in Hong Kong. There are literally tens of thousands of people who will be recording the violence on their cameras. Anyone who has been watching and following the events of the last 2 months knows that these are almost entirely peaceful protests. The violence has been on the side of the police. The violence has been on the side of the Chinese gangs known as triads, which apparently have been hired by the government or people sympathetic to mainland China to carry out attacks on unarmed peaceful demonstrators. These are provocations used to justify the use of force, and I'm afraid the use of force is coming unless Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party wake up to the fact that their respectability, their face in the Chinese sense of the term, will be completely, utterly lost for a generation.
I've got to talk about our president because he suggested it must be resolved between Hong Kong and Beijing. The protesters want him to be more forceful, of course, against Beijing and supportive of them and their movement. What would you like to see President Trump do?
Having the president say that the Chinese Communist Party should respect the liberty of the people of Hong Kong and that the issue should be worked out between Hong Kong and China, I think strikes just about the right tone. Remember, China agreed back in 1983, a long time ago, to allow Hong Kong to keep its separate economic, social, and legal system for 50 years. That 50 years should run until 2047. And yet China, Beijing, has already broken that agreement. repeatedly over the years. In 2014, they insisted on picking the chief executive, the head of the government of Hong Kong themselves, and of course they have their hand-picked candidate there now. They've sent in plainclothes policemen to arrest people who criticize the Chinese Communist Party off the streets of Hong Kong. That's why this whole extradition bill was introduced into the Hong Kong legislature several months ago, and that prompted the demonstrations. The extradition bill was to cover up the crimes of Beijing in arresting people illegally off the streets of Hong Kong. The extradition bill was supposed to allow this whole process to become legal. But make no mistake, if Beijing moves troops into Hong Kong is finished as an international financial center. It is finished as a cash cow for China itself. And all of the corrupt communist Chinese elite who have invested billions of dollars in real estate in Hong Kong and who have companies run out of Hong Kong will lose much of that money if they cause the financial center that is Hong Kong to collapse. So there's a lot riding on the outcome of this.
Fantastic analysis there. You can hear more from Stephen Mosher tonight on the Global Lane right here on the CBN News Channel at 9:30 Eastern. Okay, still ahead. Here at home, college campuses have become very hostile to conservatives, but we'll show you one organization that's helping conservative women fight back.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Welcome back to the CBN News Channel. American college campuses are increasingly hostile to young conservatives, but one organization is empowering conservative women to fight back against the liberal narrative. Caitlin Book has that story.
College can be a challenge for anyone, but especially when the culture is going against you.
I think a lot of the time on a campus, if you're conservative, you think you just have to be closeted because so many millennials do tend to lean liberal. So if you don't agree with that viewpoint, keep your mouth shut.
Sofia Chernietsky goes to Catholic University in Washington, D.C. And even there, she says she's been victim to liberal bias.
My freshman year, I actually received a lower grade on an exam than I expected because it was subjective and my political views didn't align with the person that was grading it.
Harvard student Grace Bannister says culture there is so different to hers that she feels the need to hold herself to a higher standard in order to be taken seriously.
You have to be more articulate and more well thought out than your liberal peers because
your words will be scrutinized, they will be examined, they will be held up in front of everybody, but your friend that's liberal will get the benefit of the doubt if they say more or less anything.
Grace had only been on campus for a few weeks before experiencing what she calls liberal groupthink.
I kind of went to my classes and I realized things were being taught very much through a lens, and that a lot of my peers would have the same repetitive discussions about issues and no one was disagreeing with each other. They were just nodding. And then I would say something, well, I don't think that's right. And everyone would get very confused.
As Grace and Sophia each worked to find community within their respective schools, they heard about a conservative women's group. The Network of Enlightened Women, or NEW, started with the mission to educate and embolden the next generation of conservative female leaders.
The new organization on my campus that I'm so honored to be the president of has really created this sense of community on campus for me and so many other girls across the nation to really provide this upbringing and group of like-minded individuals that really want to come together and help strengthen and embody the conservative message.
I think having this network of supportive friends, supportive women in particular, is really helpful because they've shared a lot of the same experiences and have dealt with it before.
Both girls wrote essays in a book published by NEW called She's Conservative. Grace says she hopes it will inspire others like herself to speak up.
There are a lot of young conservative women, but not a lot of them who want to stand up and say that about themselves.
Sophie says her message is more directed to the schools.
People are so concerned with making sure that their campus is very culturally diverse, but I think being intellectually diverse is something that they've kind of strayed away from.
Young conservatives on campus may be in the minority, but as they engage their peers, this next generation is working to bring back a civility that seems lost in Washington and elsewhere.
Some of my best friends are fairly liberal. We disagree about almost everything, and we can argue till we're red in the face and just come to the conclusion, I love you so much, you are one of my best friends, but I fundamentally disagree with the way that you view the world. And I may disagree with you, but I think we're both working towards what we think is a better future in the end. We just totally disagree about how to get there.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Boston, Massachusetts.
Coming up, the Army is the only branch of the service that hasn't had its own national museum up till now. We'll show you where their own museum has been built right now.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just hop on a plane and fly to a third world country and hand out food and medicine to the needy? And wouldn't it be great if some of those people came to know Jesus as their Savior because of your help? And wouldn't it be great if you could help out people like this all around the world every day? Wouldn't that make you feel great? And what if you could do all of this without having to leave your home or write monthly checks? Well, you can. Partner with CBN and you can help spread the gospel all around the world and make it a better place. And when you sign up for Pledge Express, your contribution will be deducted from your bank account every month automatically. It's a safe and simple way to make a difference. Plus, wouldn't it be great to get life-changing teachings every month from Pat and Gordon? When you sign up for Pledge Express, you'll save time and money, and you won't just sit around and watch the world go by. You'll help change it for the glory of God. Now, wouldn't that be great?
When you care, souls are set free. When you give, lives are made new. When you share, eternal life begins. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
Welcome back to the CBN News Channel. Even though the U.S. Army is the oldest branch in the U.S. military, it's the only service without its own national museum. But that's set to change next year. The future capstone of the Army is still under construction on a hill in Northern Virginia. That's where we find our Gabe LaMonica for a preview. Take a look.
When it opens, the steel fortress behind me is going to be the Army's first national museum. It's been a long time coming, but the Army took us inside for a sneak peek. The big reveal of the U.S. Army emblem on the lobby floor comes some 2 years after installing the final steel beam, and some 200 years after the 13th U.S. Congress authorized a national museum for the Army.
We are the last service to have its own national museum.
It took a lot of heavy lifting to move in everything from this Cobra King battle tank, the first in Bastogne 38-ton legend that broke the German lines during World War II's Battle of the Bulge, to this M3 Bradley fighting vehicle that led the charge in the 2003 invasion of Baghdad. All before suspending this Vietnam-era UH-1 Huey from the ceiling and bringing in hundreds of artifacts in between. Now, the oldest branch of the U.S. military is rolling along and into a 185,000 square foot glass and steel citadel above 84 acres some 20 miles south of the nation's capital.
It represents a beacon, again, the strength of the Army, the safety of the Army, and that's how we protect our citizens as well.
Tammy Call is the museum director.
We tell the Army's story, the comprehensive story, through the eyes and voices of our individual soldiers.
One of those voices belonging to the late Melvin Nestaby, who survived the Bataan Death March during World War II.
I will always be a soldier.
Hundreds of American soldiers died when the Japanese Army beat and tortured prisoners of war during a forced march of more than 60 miles.
A well of water springing up into everlasting life.
Nestaby's New Testament Pocket Bible is just one of over 7.4 million copies issued to American GIs during World War II.
Lack of water or starving, this helped them through that time.
And this good book carried Nestaby past the perils of murder and disease over the course of 4 POW camps in 3.5 years.
He carried that with him throughout the duration of the war.
Paul Mirando is the chief of exhibits.
He gave his life, his service to the United States Army, and his story, along with this Bible, needs to be told.
The museum will cover the history of the Army from the Revolutionary War to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Army says that after over 240 years, this testament to its service and its soldiers is long overdue. Gabe LaMonica, CBN News, Fort Belvoir, Virginia.
Well, that is it for today's first edition of NewsWatch. You can find more on the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com and can watch CBN News programs anytime on our CBN News channel. Plus, tell us what you think about the stories you have seen here by emailing newswatch@cbn.com, or you can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you will have a fantastic rest of your day. Have a great day, everyone.